Okay, so I will start now. This this event is also in English for all of our attendees. So we're very happy to have with us Amelia, Hallworth, and Wei, that are co-editors in chief of the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine, which is the only medical journal indexed in Medline. They're both fourth-year students of the microbiology program at Yale, and we're very happy for them to be here with us this evening, so we can talk with them about the journal they're in. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
So the dynamic of this event is going to be kind of different from the previous events, because on the previous ones we had well, it was more like standard in the sense that the persons have their presentations and they share screen them, but this is going to be more like free. So I'm going to be asking questions to them. So, and we're going to hear their answers. Okay. So I told you guys that Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine is the only medical student journal indexed in Medline. So the first question is, the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine was founded in 1928 by Dr. Milton Winternitz, who was the dean of the Yale School of Medicine from 1920 to 1935. However, the creation of this journal was not an isolated event, but it was part of the Yale the so-called the Yale system of medical education. That is a philosophy driven by Dr. Winternitz. So, Amelia, Wade, could you please tell us more about this philosophy and its importance in the context of the creation of the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine?
Of course. And I want to add, if any of you have questions over the course of this, feel free to type them in the chat and we can get to them at the end if there's time. We'd love to take additional questions if you guys are interested in them. So the big idea behind the Yale system is to promote lifelong learning in medical students, especially because medicine is constantly changing. As we can tell now, with COVID being a novel disease, the things that you learned in school may not continue to be true over the course of your entire career. And so medical students need to be able and willing to learn over time. So the idea is, instead of having them cram a bunch of information, to treat them more like grad students. So they're given freedom to take classes or do research outside of the traditional curriculum. Originally, the medical students had no exams, no grades. They could choose whether or not to go to class. It was very free and up to them. This has changed a little bit over the years due to like the school needing to be licensed. So now the students do have some required classes. They have exams now, but it's still a very flexible curriculum and a very sort of relaxed feel in comparison to a lot of other medical students. And then in addition to this, as part of this idea of treating the med students more like grad students, many of these students stay for a 5th year that is devoted just to research where they're not taking any classes. And if you're interested in learning more about the Yale system, we have a special issue on medical education that's coming out in a few days. You can find this by looking on our website. And this is going to include a manuscript that traces the development of the Yale system over time. So if you want to read more about this, we'd highly recommend you take a look at that manuscript once it comes out.
I'll also add that, so as Amelia said, the Yale system focuses a lot on sort of developing like a scientific method of thinking amongst graduate students, emphasizing sort of understanding and clinical reasoning over just memorization. And along with that, they emphasized that medical students need to be able to create and execute and successfully complete a research project. And that created sort of the ideal environment for YJBM to come to fruition as a place for medical students to publish their theses and to gain an understanding of how publishing works. And of like what peer reviewers look for and stuff like that. And so in many ways, the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine functions in parallel to complement the Yale system of medical education.
Okay, so it's going to ask you the next question, so I can fix my problems with the audio, but she knows all the.
Hi. Oh, okay. Hi. He's having a lot of problems with his computer, so I'm going to continue with the questions, and I'm going to be asking you guys. So my name is Carla Vega. I am the VP of this group. So how has the YJBM changed the research experience of the Yale medical students?
Where do you want to start?
Sure. So I'll start by emphasizing that the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine, while it started primarily as a group for medical students, it has evolved over time to include both public health students and traditional graduate students like Amelia and I. And so it really is a super interdisciplinary place to be working. With that said, I think that the way in which it's changed the experience of students the most is that it allows students to interact and work and create something in a very interdisciplinary environment and contribute to a variety of different fields. So it is able to expand the topics on which students have experience with academically and their ability to interact with peers and experts in a variety of different fields. But I think probably the most important skill that people learn through YJBM is the ability to clearly and succinctly and accurately communicate science to a variety of audiences. So YJBM, aside from the manuscripts that we publish, have a variety of other avenues for science communication. We have a podcast, we have short articles that our board members sometimes write, book reviews, interviews, etc. So it's really a big variety of ways to interface with both students and experts from a variety of fields and to learn to communicate the science of those different fields to a variety of different audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to point out that the way YJBM has functioned and sort of the role it's played in the student research experience has changed a lot over time. So as we mentioned, originally it published a lot of medical school theses or various other manuscripts that were submitted. It didn't have a really large editorial board. And so it was originally created to really complement the med school 5th year thesis and a venue for the med students to publish in and learn about publishing. But really over the past 15 years, it's been professionalizing quite a lot. So we've had more authors outside of Yale, especially more international authors has been an internal push for us, and just really high quality manuscripts. And so it's it's really sort of morphed into a professional development activity in addition to all of the science communication and interdisciplinary avenues we mentioned. So a lot of our editors are potentially interested in scientific publishing, or they want to learn more about it. And it's also a unique opportunity to develop leadership skills that are useful in jobs other than publishing. So I think for a lot of people, it's not necessarily tied to their research experience. It's something they do as a way of preparing for what comes next. Though I would definitely agree with what Wei says, is it makes you a more well-rounded scientist. Because of YJBM, I have a chance to interact with professors and with research topics I wouldn't see otherwise. And because we have MD and PhD and MPH students on our board, I get to meet students that have very different perspectives on science and very different backgrounds. And it's been a really useful source of advice and collaborations for me.
Thank you. All right. Yearly, about 15 students join the YJBM, Board of Editors. How is your student experience enriched by forming part of the Board of Editors? What skills do you learn or enhance?
So I think we talked about this a little bit in the last question. So there's writing skills, comfort with the scientific process, a leadership opportunity. It's not very many places you get to run a team that creates a PubMed and Medline indexed journal issue, or even to run the journal. But that is something that Wei and I have both been able to do. And then being part of the community of editors, it's a really good opportunity to see what happens behind the scenes. So I've improved my writing skills as a result of being able to read many different submitted manuscripts. I get to see the ethical issues that arise at a journal and figure out how to respond to them. So one of the things that comes up pretty regularly for us is plagiarism. And sometimes it's really obvious that there's plagiarism and we need to just reject the manuscript. But sometimes it's like there's one sentence in the methods section matches very closely with a sentence that's been published somewhere else. And there's only so many ways you can say we spun the cells down for 10 minutes. And so, like, is that plagiarism? How do we respond to that? And that's something that's under discussion and in flux somewhat at our journal as various cases come up, and how do we respond to that particular case? So having this sort of behind the scenes look at journal publishing is going to make it a lot easier to publish later on when I'm an author. And it's a chance to shape YJBM's future. So I mentioned YJBM really started professionalizing about 15 years ago, and those editors that started the process had no idea where their efforts would lead. And so I'm really excited to see where the journal is going to be in another 15 years as a result of my efforts.
Yeah, I'd like to echo everything Amelia has said so far and just emphasize how unique an opportunity it is to be able to work with YJBM. So aside from, all the science communication practice and the writing practice and editing practice that you would get typically from your med school or PhD curriculum, it's also a really unique opportunity to get engaged and be intimately familiar with every single aspect of the publishing pipeline. So students work on the entire issue from issue conceptualization all the way through publication. So we get to see, we're the ones that reach out to authors, we're the ones that pick peer reviewers, we're the ones that read manuscripts and decide where it might need to be revised for clarity. And then ultimately, like Amelia said, we're also the ones that make decisions on potentially ethically murky problems that might come up in the publishing process. So that's been a really amazing experience. So learning to communicate science and also learning to communicate with experts in the field about how to present their paper. Yeah, that's something that I really appreciated throughout this whole process.
That's actually really cool. All right. YJBM has been since 1949. What's the formula for YJBM to stay active since that time?
So I would say the one really important thing has been that we've had consistent support from the medical school. We've had every single dean has been very supportive of us in terms of time, in terms of funding. YJBM does not make the school money. We are a money sink for them. Not very much, but we don't make the school money. And so having that support from the school has been critical for us. In addition to that, even beyond the administration, the professors have been very, very willing to give their time to meet with us, to give advice, to give talks for us, to write manuscripts for us. It seems like anytime we email a professor, if we start it with, "Hi, I'm a graduate student at Yale, can you help us?" They're always going to say yes, and that's been amazing. And so that would not have been possible without the support from the medical school. The other thing that's been really important for us is we have two fantastic people in these long-term roles. So we have a faculty advisor named Jeff Bender and an editorial coordinator named Kate Woodford. And the journal would not be able to continue without their constant support and advocacy, partially because they're present in those faculty and staff meetings and making sure YJBM isn't forgotten about, but also because they're incredibly, incredibly knowledgeable and a really great source of institutional memory. I don't think the journal would be possible if students had to remember everything and pass it down. There's just too much turnover to be students graduate. So I know that I can ask Kate, "Hey, has this situation ever come up before, and how have we handled it in the past?" And she'll know. And if she doesn't know, she'll know where to look to find the answer. And so they're amazing, and we love them, and we would not be able to do this without them. What else? Wait, do you want to add anything while I'm thinking if there's something else?
Yeah, I would like to emphasize that Kate and Jeff are really amazing resources. They play a big role in advising us in how to make the journal professional and how to maintain our credibility in the field. And I think that that's a big reason behind, why we do get manuscripts and why ultimately we've gotten the impact factor. So that's been really awesome. And then I guess a little bit more on the logistical side of things. It's worth mentioning that writing a journal is not just, the peer review process or just getting manuscripts. A lot of it has also been sort of how do we present ourselves to the medical school? How do we, communicate the niche that we offer for students? How do we make sure that we look professional and not like a predatory journal? And all of that helps us promote our mission and encourage people to send manuscripts to us, knowing that we're not going to do something terrible to it. And then the other thing has been, since we publish on focus topics, so we publish 4 times a year, and each issue is focused on a specific theme. So for example, in the past, we've had entire issues devoted to death, so the basic science all the way up to the clinical science. We have an upcoming issue focused on medical education, issue focused on medicinal plants. So because we focus on very specific topics, when we reach out to authors for manuscripts, we're not tapping into the same field over and over again. And so people are often more receptive to contributing a manuscript that way. And it also is really good for maintaining student interest because the topics are so varied, and it keeps it lively, I guess.
Yeah. I guess two more things I want to mention. I think it was helpful that we had very slow, sustainable growth. YJBM spent more than 50 years publishing small issues and mostly just publishing manuscripts from Yale people or medical students. And so I think having had that time to develop, and the fact that we didn't try to do too much too fast, I think might have led to us burning out as a journal if we had tried to do that. And then also I think the inclusion of PhD and MPH students in addition to medical students has been incredibly helpful for us as a journal. Med students, especially when they're in a clinic, don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of their time. And so we have very different roles at YJBM, and some of them have more flexibility or less flexibility, or more time commitment or less time commitment. And so having that variety of students makes it easier to draw from them. So for example, the editor-in-chief role that Wei and I both fill takes a lot of time and doesn't have a whole lot of flexibility. So for example, we check our emails every single day. We need to be available for meetings and interviews like this. And so it's really, really hard for med students in their clinical years to fill it. So having those extra pools of people who are taking their MPH or taking their PhD means we don't have to worry about filling the roles and trying to find someone who's in their 5th year and doing research to fill this role. We have lots more people who are available. And then I also want to reemphasize the importance of having people who have diverse perspectives and ways of looking at research that you get. Wei mentioned the fact that there's focus topics, mean you have people with different interests. Also the fact that we have PhD and MPH students means that there's people with different interests. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but really having such a diverse community of people on our board has been amazing and has really made me think about my science differently and made me a better scientist and a better person.
Yes, and well, thank you, Perla, for covering me up. Some moments ago, I couldn't hear you. I saw your faces, and I know you were talking, but I couldn't hear you. And I'm glad I'm back, and I can now hear you. So thank you for your answer. It was pretty interesting, especially the part where you said that such a diverse community helps, has helped YJBM has helped YJBN in making it stronger, because it addresses medical problems since multiple points of view. So it's really interesting, that part. And moving on to our next question, I told you before starting that we have right now 51 students that are in their preclinical years, and most of them, but some others are in their clinical sciences years. So, but they all have in common that they are interested in research. So for them, we have the next question that is, well, for you, but for a tip or for a recommendation, what types of articles do you publish in the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine? And what types of articles do you recommend medical students could start with? And it's more like giving us some advice as to how to start a research or a publication for the students present in today's interview.
So I guess to start, so YJBM publishes a variety of different articles. We publish everything ranging from case studies to reviews, interviews, and of course original research, and many more. I'd say maybe one very accessible form of an article for medical students would be a case study. If you're working in the clinic and you have a clinically interesting interaction with a patient, then that could be one potential subject to write about. Otherwise, if you're engaged in a research project, then that would also be something that you could write about. I'd say generally what's really important for writing a manuscript is just to know what you want to say, know the narrative that you want to put out, and before you even start writing, decide your structure, because some of our, I'd say like some of our most laborious manuscripts, I think, come to us when authors write and the logic sort of meanders, and those manuscripts require a lot of work. And it becomes clear that maybe the logical flow isn't there, that they haven't, sat down and thought about in advance what they wanted to communicate. So in general terms, if you know what you want to say, if you know the scientific story that you want to put out, it becomes a lot easier to write a manuscript. And then from there, it's a matter of what kind of article you want to write. Maybe Amelia can go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I would second what Wei said. One thing, if you want to look for, so we publish issues around focus topics, and we only publish manuscripts related to those topics. So if you want to look at our website, it's medicine.yale.edu/YJBM. On there, we have information about all the different kinds of manuscripts we publish and about our upcoming focus topics. But I want to reemphasize what Wei said of, you should start with what you want to talk about, more so than starting with, I want to write a particular kind of manuscript. The article types are very different from each other. So if you have an interesting patient interaction, then you'd write a case study. And if you want to review a topic in the literature, you'd write a review. So I second her comment about start with the story. And then once you have the story, thank you so much, Alejandro, for posting that. Once you have the story, I would start by reading a lot of other manuscripts, ideally the same kind of manuscript you'll be writing. And it will give you a sense of like the topic and structure of the manuscript and the tone of the writing. Also read a lot because you'll need references for your manuscript. In terms of writing resources, there's a lot online that will walk you through the different parts of the manuscript and what they should include. And then most of your time writing a manuscript is not going to actually be writing. Most of it is going to be either reading or editing. So you're going to want to, once you have a draft, run it by as many people as you can, professors, the head of your lab or scientific advisor, your peers, if your university has a writing center, anybody you can get to read it really. And expect that there's going to be many rounds of edits, including additional rounds of edits after submission, like Wei mentioned. And then more broadly, in terms of how to get into research, because Alejandro, am I correct? That was also part of the question?
Yes, an advice as to how to start research or publication.
Yes. So in terms of how to get into research, this might be different in other places, but I started as an undergraduate in a lab. So what I did was I had read about the professor's work. They had a website, and I just sent an email to introduce myself. And in the email, I talked about who I was and why I was interested in their research. And this didn't just happen. I had to do this for several different professors before I found someone who would let me join their lab. But the hardest part was like working up the courage to send an email to someone who didn't know me. I would say. Wei, what do you think?
Yeah, I second that for sure, especially at the undergraduate level. Just figuring out how to even approach a professor is a huge obstacle, but oftentimes, you don't need to be an expert in the topic that you want to study before you reach out to anybody about it. So if you, sort of have an informed opinion on why you want to work on something and you go to the professor with that, usually they'll be receptive. They don't expect you to already have a PhD in the thing you want to study. I got into research also as an undergrad. In my case, my university offered a fellowship for early undergraduates to get involved in research. And so I had that, and then it was just a matter of finding a lab that would host me. So I did research through all of undergrad, and by the end of undergrad, I decided that I really do like being able to do bench work and that I wanted to do more of it, and that's, I guess, how I'm here. But yeah, definitely read a lot, as Amelia mentioned. Definitely go to conferences if you can to get a good sense of what kind of research is out there as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, and I don't know if if our attendees have some questions for our guests. So it's really an honor for us to have you here because, just to put it in context for our attendees, our university was founded in 1969, and just to put it in context, I repeat, this journal was founded in 1928, and it's indexed in Medline since 1949. So they have a lot of time publishing and promoting research. So I would recommend our attendees, so if you have a question, don't miss the chance of asking one. So we have one. It says, any recommendations on what to add to the letter to the faculty so I can approach research as an undergraduate? I think he refers more like how you could ask a faculty professor to be your mentor, for example, your research mentor.
So I think my email was something along the lines of, hello, Dr. So-and-so. I'm a undergraduate in whatever year, and I read about your research on whatever. I find it really interesting. I'm especially interested in blah, blah, blah. Would you have time to meet with me to discuss your research further and whether you have space in your lab? And thank you, Amelia, and something like that. And then that way, even if they don't have space in their lab, they can still maybe meet with you and talk to you about the research. And it's a cool conversation, even if they don't have space in your lab, even if you don't end up joining the lab.
Yeah, I second what Amelia said. My email was something very similar. I think the main goal is to communicate that you have taken the effort to understand, who they are as a lab and what they study, so that they know you're not just sort of, trigger happy with your email, that you've, taken the time to understand what they study and that you are genuinely interested in their work.
I guess one other thing you could try, if you have a scientific advisor. So I had a faculty advisor who was in the biology department, and I wasn't interested in his research too much, but I did talk to him about the fact I was interested in research and talk to him about the labs I was interested in. And it might be easier if the email comes from him instead of from me. So if that's your situation where you have an advisor that you think you could talk to about that, that might be helpful as well. You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you very much. As I said at the beginning, it's really a big honor for us, for ALEM UDEM, to have you this evening tonight talking with us about Yale Journal Biology and Medicine. So in a few moments, I will, throughout an email, I will send you a certificate for participation for being in this interview. So once again, thank you very much on behalf of ALEM UDEM and University of Monterrey.
Thank you so much for having us. It was great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.